My last memory from my past life was walking into a sewer hole after my middle school graduation ceremony. There was a feeling of falling into a never-ending darkness, but the reality of death never came. Rattle. When I finally gained consciousness, I saw a mountain of skulls before me. Panicked, I looked around, but the reality didn't seem to sink in. No, almost like I didn't have any emotions. I checked my body, hands and legs, and saw only bones. I had become a skeleton soldier like right out of a fantasy novel. What's this? I reached out to touch the screen floating before my eyes. Name, N.A. Gender, N.A. Status, normal. Type, skeleton, undead. Class, soldier. Rank, H. Level, 1/5. HP, 5/5. MP, 1/1. Damage, 1. Defense, 1. Agility, 2. Intelligence, 1. Unique skills. Resurrection Lv1, Night Vision Lv1. I had wanted to come to such a world, but why did I have to be a level 1 skeleton soldier? Why? For me, who had dreamed of worlds found in light novels or fantasy games, this situation was terrible. Regardless, my new life as a nameless skeleton soldier began. Still, at least there is a level and ability system. If I work hard and practice my skills, shouldn't it be possible to improve? It was at this time, while trying to motivate myself, that the skulls around me began to move. Rattle. Rattle. Bones and skulls began rising randomly, attempting to find their rightful place and form a skeleton. What's this? I tried to say, but only managed to make the sound of jaws chomping down. Clack. Clack. Meanwhile, dozens of skeletons had been assembled and they began walking down the mountain of bones. What's going on? Are we going for a walk? The appearance of the skeletons varied greatly. First the skulls were different, some were tall, others short. Then some had a missing arm, pieces of rotten flesh still attached, a dagger in one hand, and one was even equipped with a sword and shield. From afar, I heard someone shout. "Gillian, I told you we should have brought a priest over. Don't you know how hard it is to find a priest these days?" "Oh, never mind, the skeletons are already here, please hold them off a while, I hope this magic will be effective against them." "Are they adventurers or just a group of bandits?" The walls of the corridor in which the skeletons walked were of dark marble, giving an eerie feeling. The path had been largely unused and looked like an underground graveyard with a thick layer of dust and many spiderwebs. Along the way we had to avoid several pits where the old floors had crumbled. Block your ears. Fire elemental, heed my call. Raflima strike. A large fireball flew in the air and hit the leading skeletons, resulting in an explosion sending all of them flying. I was hit by several debris and bone shrapnels until finally the shockwave also blew me away into a pit. Oh no, it's just like the sewer hole I had died in my previous life. I fell into a dark pit, unable to see anything. Clang. Before losing consciousness a message appeared. You have learned falling resistance Lv1. Am I going to die like this again? No wait, wasn't there a resurrection skill? My sight darkened, as if the power had gone off. When I finally opened my eyes again I was in a wreckage of skeleton soldiers, hundreds of bro. Am I the only one who has resurrected? I had been conscious for a while now, but no other skeletons showed any sign of reviving. I just stayed in the same spot with a blank look. Should I do something, go and explore this world? I looked around and noticed that some equipment from the dead skeletons was still intact. Scavenging around I acquired a small dagger, shield and broken helmet. Energized from having worn some equipment, I suddenly felt like a player in a fantasy game. So where to next? I was in high spirits. I thought of raising my level, wearing the best equipment and becoming a great warrior. But then it sunk in, a lowly level 1 skeleton soldier can never become a hero. Walking for a long time in the dark I realized I was in a complex underground tunnel system with many branching caves. The only sign of life were the occasional rats, but they could spot me from far and would scare easily. I have to kill something to determine whether my level can actually go up. Still, could a level 1 skeleton soldier even catch a monster? Maybe not. After about an hour of wandering around, I had a good grasp of my environment and the structure of nearby caves. There seemed to be no big, terrifying monsters, just the occasional rats and liquid-like slimes in the area. In RPGs, the slime is often a beginner monster with high physical damage resistance, and since my only offense was the small dagger I scavenged previously, I decided to give up on hunting slimes for now. My only option was going after those rats, but the problem was that they were too fast. If I catch them using a trap, would my experience still go up? It seemed like creating traps and attracting the rats to it might be my only option. The cave had very little in the way of vegetation, but there was some moss in hard-to-reach places. Previously I had witnessed them eating some on several occasions. I went around the cave gathering moss and carefully picked out a cave which was a dead end. After spreading the moss around inconspicuously, I sat down against the wall motionless, appearing like any other dead skeleton, waiting for my chance. 1 hour, 2 hours, on a few occasions the rats would come to the entrance attracted by the smell of the moss, but they were hesitant to enter knowing it was a dead end. Are the rats too cautious? These rats were bigger than mice, but smaller than puppies. They wouldn't be hard to kill if they came within reach of my dagger, but therein lay the difficulty. Exercising patience, I remained motionless, playing the part of the dead skeleton. Finally, it's coming. But there was a problem. 4 of them were approaching at the same time. Perhaps emboldened by their safety in numbers, they approached the moss cautiously. I stealthily readied my hand holding the dagger. Wait, I don't have muscles, so how can I move? Just as the rats were nearing, my mind was filled with unnecessary thoughts. Still approaching carefully, the lead rat came before me and began to sniff me. Maybe I smelled of moss, or perhaps they were just ensuring their safety. I planned to catch as many as possible, so I stayed motionless like a dead skeleton. Squeak. Squeak. The rats talked among themselves, confirming it was safe. The other 3 also rushed towards the moss. Rattle. The moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. I stabbed the closest rat with my dagger and threw the shield in my left hand to pin down the other 3. Although I had been quick, the rat's reaction speed was beyond my expectation. I had caught one, but the other 3 had nimbly sidestepped my shield. +1 experience points. Acquired knowledge of tomb rodents. The 2 messages appeared instantly before my eyes, and I could see the status of the remaining 3 rats in the corner. Status: normal. Type: tomb rodent. Rank: H. Level: 2/5. HP: 7/7. MP: 1/1. Attack: 1. Defense: 1. Agility: 5. Intelligence: 1. Unique skills: N, A. What? Are those rats really a higher level than I am? I hadn't leveled up by killing just the one and wasn't sure how many I needed, but for now the problem at hand was how to catch the last 3 in front of me. The rats watched my movements carefully, smelling around looking for a way out. While I stood in this choke point, they couldn't escape, but if I advanced to attack them they could run along the sides. However, I had discovered my greatest ability as a skeleton soldier: unlimited stamina. I had been walking around for hours and realized that I didn't feel thirsty, hungry or tired. So, in situations like the current Mexican standoff, I had an absolute advantage over any living creature. Several hours later, the tomb rats' physical strength was waning. Perhaps it was because they were originally hungry, and along with the ongoing tense situation, their body's energy was quickly drained. I, on the other hand, was always in optimal condition. I didn't need to move, didn't tire, and didn't even need to use the bathroom. A few hours more and the tomb rats' stamina had finally hit rock bottom. They bared their teeth, poised for their final outburst of strength. It seemed they had decided to try for a last hurrah rather than dying of exhaustion. But, over the last few hours I had been moving my body ever so slightly to one side, purposely creating this opportunity for them. I worried that in a life and death situation they would rush at me in panic, but if they saw an opening I could better control the situation. Finally, the moment I had been waiting for. Squeak. Squeak. The biggest of the 3 lurched forward and the other 2 followed closely behind. I was delighted to see that they took the bait and all aimed for the small gap I had created. Got you. I simply stabbed forward in an underhand movement, the dagger skimming above the floor almost as if I were brooming. The rats were running too quickly in single file and all three skewered themselves on my dagger. A message appeared before my eyes. +1 experience points. +2 experience points. +4 experience points. Level increased 1/4. Acquired title, Rat Trapper. Ha! The experience. Is it different because I killed 3 at the same time? The first time I hunted a rat I only gained 11 experience points, but when I killed 3 I gained 77, that's more than twice as much as what I expected. Is it because catching them at the same time gives more experience? Check status. Name. Gender, N-A. Status, normal. Type, skeleton, undead. Class, soldier. Rank, H. Level, 4/5. HP, 15/15. MP, 1/1. Attack, 3. Defense, 1. Agility, 2. Intelligence, 1. Unique skills. Resurrection Lv1, Night Vision Lv1, Falling Resistance Lv1. Titles. Rat Trapper. I wanted to continue to catch more rats to gain experience, but it seemed none would approach because they could smell the stench of blood. I cleaned my dagger on a dead rat's fur and took the moss with me, searching for another dead-end cave to repeat the process. This time I waited for a much longer period of time, but still no rats approached. When even the moss I had carried over was beginning to dry, a huge creature, unlike any previous tomb rats, appeared. What? It looks like a big boar, but what did it eat to get so big? The big creature was actually a tomb rat, but it was rank G. It was a named monster shining in gold, Tyrant of the Tombs. Could it be like the unique monsters found in RPGs? Still, compared to the current me, a level 8 monster was far too strong. Name Tyrant of the Tombs. Status, normal. Type, tomb rodent. Rank, G. Level, 8/15. HP, 44/44. MP, 10/10. Attack, 20. Defense, 5. Agility, 10. Intelligence, 1. Unique skills. Dash, Gluttony, Berserk. Every instinct was telling me that if we were to fight, I'd certainly get one-shotted. I leaned back against the wall and tried to stay still while it was eating. However, after it finished eating the moss it turned to me with interest. It approached and started sniffing and tussling my body every which way. It even became interested in the dagger in my hand and tried to take it away. No way, I can't lose this dagger. Without a dagger it would be very difficult to hunt. Just as I began to apply some power in my arms to resist, the tyrant rat noticed and immediately tore off my entire arm. Roar WRRR. A roar never before made by a rat was heard in the narrow cave. He spat out my arm holding the dagger to the side and took a step back, preparing to dash towards me. Shit. I should have just given up on the dagger. Comments, 3. Surligatia, March 31, 2021. Bang! Before I could get back on my feet, he rushed me and pinned my bones up against the wall. Thrashing around it tore off my remaining arm and legs, scattering them across the floor and squished me into the wall. Shit. I'll get my revenge. I was stuck in the wall, no limbs and hardly able to move. It took hours just to shuffle my way a few centimeters. Rustle. Finally, a few hours later I was able to pull out my body from the hole in the wall. What a rude guy, threw my limbs around. Is it too much to ask to at least put them in a neat little pile? I began crawling slowly towards my bones scattered across the cave. I found a piece and tried to put it in its place and was happy to know it fused well. Going around I slowly gathered more pieces and limbs, recovering some strength. I had realized that my HP had diminished significantly since I had lost some bones. After about 60 to 70 hours I finally found all the pieces and recovered my strength. I'm feeling alright, but my right arm and dagger. My missing right arm and dagger were the biggest problem. I was left with only the one arm, 2 legs, a shield and an old helmet. I returned to the pile of bones where I had found my previous equipment, looking for a suitable weapon. What about this one? It was a broken femoral bone from a skeleton soldier, which was most likely a deceased colleague of mine. I tried to sharpen it against the rock wall, but it would always crumble and seemed to have very low durability. At the very least it was nowhere near as solid as iron. The Tomb Tyrant's attack power was 20, right? But I'm somehow still alive. Was he just fooling around with me? My anger towards the big rat was rising, and I really wanted to get my revenge. I thought about trying to level up once. It might only be one level, but I hoped something would happen if I hit maxed level. I gathered some more moss and created the same trap, waiting. Eventually 2 tomb rats took the bait and I made quick work of them, absorbing the experience. It felt like I had become more skilled after a few attempts. Plus 1 experience points. Plus 2 experience points. Level increased 4-5. Level has reached max. Evolution is now possible. Was evolution possible? Thoughts were racing through my mind as I decided to check my status. What kind of evolution would it be? Would it help me overcome the Tomb Tyrant? Name. Gender, N.A. Status, normal. Type, skeleton, undead. Class, soldier. Rank, H. Level, 5/5, max. HP, 15/15. MP, 1/1. Attack, 7. Defense, 3. Agility, 5. Intelligence, 1. Unique skills. Resurrection Lv1, Night Vision Lv1, Falling Resistance Lv1. Titles. Rat Trapper. Evolution choice. Skeleton Warrior, Skeleton Wizard, Skeleton Rogue. The evolution options seem to follow a standard RPG series. The Skeleton Warrior most likely focuses on strength, the Wizard seems to be able to manipulate magic, and the Rogue is probably an assassin type. Because of my current one-arm situation, the Wizard path seemed the most advantageous for me. Also, the Tyrant didn't have any magic powers, so magic was most likely its weakness, making my evolution path an easy choice. I stretched out one finger and selected the Wizard option on the sphere before my eyes. A light shone on me and it felt like my body was heating up. What? Is it done? What's changed? I searched every nook and cranny. Name. Gender, N.A. Status, normal. Type, skeleton, undead. Class, wizard. Rank, H+. Level, 1/20. HP, 5/5. MP, 5/5. Attack, 1. Defense, 1. Agility, 2. Intelligence, 3. Unique skills. Resurrection Lv1, Night Vision Lv1, Falling Resistance Lv1. Magic Chanting Lv1, Fire Shock Lv1. Titles. Rat Trapper. Just Fire Shock. Having played many RPGs, I was familiar with many magic spells. Fire Shock would usually be one of the lowest level fire spells. Fire Shock. I shouted, pointing towards the wall. Bang! Magic Chanting level 1-2. Fire Shock level 1-2. Somehow when it came to magic chants I was able to speak, but except for the magic spells it was still impossible to vocalize anything besides the sound of my teeth chomping. This has quite a lot of constraints. Waiting for my mana to refill, I sent out more fire shocks towards the wall and began grinding the skill, repeating the cycle thousands of times. I had endless stamina, suffering from neither hunger nor fatigue, so besides waiting for my mana I could train the skill endlessly. Magic Chanting level 5-6. Fire Shock level 9-10. Fire Shock level has reached max. I had maxed out the skill after using Fire Shock about 4,000, approximately 5,000 times. I also concluded that using magic alone didn't give out any experience points. How much time has passed? Underground in these tunnels I couldn't sense the passage of time because of the lack of fatigue, hunger or need for sleep. Although it was a bit annoying to grind the skill endlessly, I was mostly curious to know if I could become impatient because in my previous life I would probably give up after just 10 tries. I decided that the slime would be my first victim to practice my magic. Naturally, in RPGs the beginner slimes had physical resistance but were conversely weak to magic. Besides, trapping tomb rats was time-consuming and there was always the chance that they escape. Fire shock. Bang! When my spell hit the slime, which was spread out like a puddle, it instantly gathered up into the shape of a ball. I didn't know anything about its stats or level because I first needed to kill one to check its status page. The slime turned and began moving slowly in my direction since I aggroed it with my magic. I might be in trouble because I only have enough MP for one fire shock. So I elected to use hit and run tactics because the slime was quite slow. Simply running away and waiting for my MP to refill. The slime chased me wholeheartedly, but I could easily keep my distance by simply walking a bit faster. Has it been about 20 shots? A message appeared before my eyes. Plus 77 experience points. Acquired knowledge of tomb slimes. You can now learn new magic. Acquired title, Hit and Run. The slime's body melted into a pool of liquid, sinking into the cave floor. What? It was just the one, but it gave as much experience as hunting 3 tomb rats at the same time. It was a good decision on my part to avoid the slimes at the very start. Judging from how much experience they gave, they were quite powerful. I opened my status page. Name, N.A. Gender, N.A. Status, normal. Type, skeleton, undead. Class, wizard. Rank, H+. Level, 4/20. HP, 17/17. MP, 25/25. Attack, 3. Defense, 2. Agility, 5. Intelligence, 12. Unique skills. Resurrection Lv1, Night Vision Lv1, Falling Resistance Lv1, Magic Chanting Lv6. Fire Shock Max. Titles. Rat Trapper, Hit and Run. Spell Selection. Fireball Lv1, Lesser Slow Lv1, Minor Poison Lv1. It was the perfect fit for me. Fireball would be a bit redundant considering my Fire Shock, but Slow is exactly what I needed. Finalizing my selection, I turned to a nearby slime. Status, normal. Type, tomb slime. Rank, G. Level, 7/15. HP, 22/20. MP, 1/1. Attack, 1. Defense, 1000. Agility, 5. Intelligence, 1. Unique skills. Physical resistance Lv2. Slow. The slimes were originally quite slow, but after casting my slow spell, I could simply outwalk it nonchalantly. I decided to raise the level of my lesser slow as it might be a crucial survival tool in the future. Beginning the long skill grind, I casted lesser slow and waited for my mana to refill. Eventually, after several thousand chants. Magic Chanting Lv7/8. Lesser Slow Lv9/10. Lesser Slow has reached max. Magic Chanting was surprisingly difficult to level up compared to other skills. I thought it was a crucial skill to focus on as it served as a foundation to all other spells, and in battle, a fraction of a second could make a huge difference. Still, I decided to put it to the side for now and simply let it increase as I grinded other spells. Now, hunting slimes with Fire Shock was a piece of cake. A single Fire Shock could wipe out 3 HP from a slime. It seems I would need 15 Fire Shocks to bring down the Tyrant of the Tombs. I don't have nearly enough mana at the moment, right? One Fire Shock consumes 5 megapixels, so 75 mana should be enough to kill it. Actually, considering that I'll need to kite it with hit and run tactics and casting lesser slow, 100 mana would be a more conservative number. Obviously going head to head with it was impossible. Plus 7 experience points. Level increased 4-6. MP increased from 25 to 40, as I was a wizard my mana growth was substantial. I eventually caught all the slimes nearby and was able to hit level 10. Occasionally I would see the tyrant in the distance, but I always chose to avoid it. After a few sightings I was able to map out its trajectory so I would be ready for my revenge fight. Unfortunately there were no more slimes left to level up. I'm not sure how magic acquisition works. I thought simply by leveling up I would gain new skills, but after reaching a threshold like level 10 I didn't receive any message. I tried to brainstorm some new hypotheses for magic acquisition. Could the new skills depend on which monsters I hunt? Is there a maximum number of skills I can learn? Regardless, worrying about it wouldn't help, so I decided to simply try to catch some tomb rats, but I needed a different strategy since I had no dagger. I decided to max out my magic chanting and hoped with the faster cast speed I could hit those quick rodents. Several thousands of fire shocks later magic chanting reached max. Now, by focusing well I could cast lesser slow within 0.3 seconds. I gathered some moss once again and began waiting patiently. Please tyrant, don't show up. Fortunately it was 4 tomb rats that showed up. Do these guys always travel together? Just as last time, they were cautious at first but eventually, thinking it was safe, they rushed to eat the tasty moss. I casted 4 consecutive spells. Slow. 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 Within the short span of just 1.2 seconds, all 4 rats were slowed considerably. At the end of the chorus, I quickly finished them off individually with the bone knife. Level increased 10-11. My leveling speed was much slower compared to the slimes, but at least there was some improvement. MP was rising steadily, so I prepared another trap and sat down to wait, but this time around there was a problem. Shit. The tyrant. I chose a cave which was far from its usual path, but somehow it appeared before me. The moment it saw me it crouched low, heels digging into the ground, its huge body ready to explode with great strength. Oh, he seems to have recognized me instantly, it's quite intelligent. What should I do? My thoughts were in turmoil, but the giant rodent had already sprung forth, rushing towards me. I had less than half a second to make a decision. Slow. 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 I quickly casted 3 lesser slows, unsure but hopeful that it could be stacked. Just as it arrived I jumped to the side, narrowly avoiding its charge as I checked its status. State slow, low. Unfortunately the skill didn't stack, but it should be fine. I was capable of dodging its charge if it was in a slowed state. Just like I'd done with the slimes I ran around the cave, alternating between lesser slow and fire shock. Always calculating and keeping in mind my MP consumption, I continued to kite the tyrant. After going in circles about 10 times the tomb tyrant's face became red, seemingly getting angry. Shit. Are you using Berserk? Right, it's quite a common skill among bosses. Although it didn't dispel the slow effect, its speed increased noticeably. The tomb tyrant only had 6 HP left, I could finish him off with only 3 more fire shocks. The problem was that I only had 7 megapixels remaining, which only left me with enough for a maximum of 2 fire shocks, leaving him with 1 HP. I racked my brains searching for a solution. Yes, I can try that. A crazy idea came to me. It would be too depressing if my other arm were torn off, so I needed to defeat him now at all costs. Fire shock. I sent the first spell out and put my back up against the wall, facing the incoming tyrant. I have to go through with it, it's the only way. I lift up my bone knife to the charging giant rat. My solution was to use its incoming momentum to cause the remaining 1 point damage. Of course my body would also be smashed in the process, but it was the only plan I could think of. Bang! Crack! I heard the bones in my arm crumbling as the tyrant rammed me into the wall. I quickly shoot out my last fire shock with my last MP right before losing my last arm. Time passed so slowly, like in increments 0.1 second. I saw my bones and ribs splintering into tiny pieces just as I saw my HP drop to 0 on my status window. Please work. My vision went dark like a computer which had been powered down. When I finally came to it, I opened my eyes and saw my body had been completely crushed, tiny pieces of my bones littering the cave floor. In the middle of it all lay the tyrant of the tombs, motionless. Did I succeed? If I had not managed to use fire shock at the last second, perhaps he would have survived and taken the rest of my limbs. I wondered if I would be able to cast magic without having a left arm, but to be honest it was something I would rather not have to find out firsthand. Just like the first time, I was embedded into the wall from the collision and struggled to wiggle myself out. With my HP at rock bottom, my movements were sluggish and I struggled to gather my bone pieces scattered on the floor like a mosaic. This time around it took me 200 to 230 hours to collect all my pieces because my condition was much worse. Perhaps it was because compared to the first time, when the tyrant was just fooling around, it was in a berserk state with its life threatened. Alright, did I gain some experience and level up? I opened my status page just as I finished reattaching my left arm. Name, N.A. Gender, N.A. Status, normal. Type, skeleton, undead. Class, wizard. Rank, H+. Level, 9/20. HP, 19/19. MP, 70/70. Attack, 12. Defense, 2. Agility, 7. Intelligence, 21. Unique skills. Resurrection Lv1, Night Vision Lv1, Falling Resistance Lv1, Magic Chanting Max. Fire Shock Max. Titles. Rat Trapper, Hit and Run. Surprisingly, my level had dropped despite having killed the named monster. Could it be a death penalty? Looking closer, I even noticed my stats had dropped slightly. Can dying be such a big loss? Well, oh, wait a minute. I quickly checked my status page to confirm something. Maybe not. Unfortunately, there was no way to verify my hypothesis at the moment, so I simply put it to the back of my skull and began to cut apart the giant rodent's body. I was searching for my missing right arm, expecting to find it half digested in its stomach, but all I found were pieces of moss and the bodies of tomb rats. Where did this guy put my right arm? Trying my hand at tracking, I retraced its steps and searched several times along its usual roaming routes until I came across a side path I hadn't noticed previously. It's my first time seeing this right. Following the new path carefully, I was led to a dead-end cave with a mountain of glittering jewels, shiny gold, equipment, and my right arm holding a dagger. Is this the tyrant's hideout? Is this all of its spoils? Where did all these jewels come from? I reattached my right arm and started rummaging through the mountain of spoils looking for something useful. Perhaps I was being too enthusiastic because the pile of jewels and gold collapsed. What's this? I noticed that there was a hole that was previously hidden from sight behind the mountain of treasure. Looking past, I noticed it led up to a familiar place with marble walls. The tyrant had most probably collected all these things from across this hole and brought them back to his hideout. By holding an item in my hands, I could check its properties by simply clicking on the blinking light in the status page. After going through all the equipment, I decided on a red robe, a magically enchanted dagger with an embedded jewel in the hilt and a sturdy round shield with glittering gems. It seemed like the tomb tyrant was very fond of shiny objects. I looked to buy. Should I get started? I crawled through the hole and ended up in a dark cave in which only the moss emitted a faint light, illuminating the space somewhat, allowing me to see some rough silhouettes. When my eyes finally adjusted, I was able to see clearly thanks to the night vision skill. Oh. It had a different vibe compared to the previous place. For one, it was a much bigger space and the marble walls were a dull, dark black. The only things I was able to make out in the darkness were a few stone statues and pillars, but that alone was enough to stimulate my sense of adventure. Should I go take a look around? Maybe since I had become a skeleton, my concept of danger had changed somewhat. Or is it possible that because I'm living in adventure, then I naturally become braver? In my former world, I would never consider roaming through such a dark and scary place. I began walking around, but even after some time, I hadn't seen any signs of life or movement for that matter. Unlike the previous cave and tunnel system, this area was incredibly vast, so I decided to think of it as catacombs. After some exploring, I did find 2 places that could possibly lead me to other floors, but they were both blocked by large iron doors. I began searching nearby, hoping to find a key or some mechanism to unlock the doors, but it was all for naught. There was this one room that had a pile of treasure inside, but despite looking carefully I didn't find any keys or useful items. If I take all these treasures, could I enjoy a luxurious lifestyle? Just as the thought crossed my mind, I realized the folly of it and became depressed. If people were to see a rich skeleton walking around with jewels, I would definitely be beaten down and robbed of all my valuables. To top it off, I'm also a good source of experience points, so I'll definitely be killed. Damn it, why am I a skeleton? Even if I were a gremlin or goblin, I would at least be able to enjoy these jewels. My head hung low, dejected by my current situation. Well, there's nothing I can do about it. Perhaps these treasure might be useful later, so let's just take them. Finding 2 expensive-looking pouches nearby, I filled them to the brim with jewels, gems and any shiny items before carefully placing them within my robe, out of sight from greedy eyes. While rummaging through the pile of treasure, I seemed to have knocked a transparent bottle to the floor, but fortunately it didn't break. A light within it began to shine. Ha, what's that? A firefly. Looking closely, I noticed a bright, shining fairy-like creature the size of my index finger. It seemed to be grumbling and malcontent about being stuck in a bottle, but I couldn't make out what it was saying. I stared at it in the bottle a while longer. It had pointy ears, rich golden hair and the perfect face of a cute western child from a fantasy game. However, it appeared very angry at the moment, showing its teeth and seemingly screaming at the top of its lungs, but the bottle was well sealed and very little sound was heard. Should I set it free? I could empathize somewhat with its situation, because although I wasn't stuck in a bottle, I did feel trapped within these catacombs. Clink. The sound of the sealed lid being opened was quite loud because it had been closed for a long time. The little fairy inside seemed dazed by the change in atmospheric pressure. I reached out to carefully grab it and placed it on my bony hand. It was strange to see it laying on my hand but be unable to feel it. It was somewhat out of place seeing such a beautiful creature on my ugly skeleton hand. You didn't have to open it so forcefully, grumbled the fairy as it stood up and rubbing its ear to check its hearing. Chomp. Chomp. I tried to ask if it was okay, but only the clacking of my teeth could be heard. You aren't just any skeleton, right? Interesting. Have I been stuck in a bottle for too long and the world has changed? Do skeletons have intelligence now? The fairy took to the air with its little wings, flying around inspecting me with an incredulous look on her face. I felt somewhat uncomfortable by her rude actions, but it was my first time meeting another being that could speak, so I simply accepted it. Should I ask her to follow me? I stretched out my index finger pointing to the fairy. Ha! What are you doing? I pointed at her, myself, and then used 2 fingers to do an impression of walking. Ah, what does that mean? Do you want me to follow you? I nodded my head. Wait, why? Why do I need to go around with a scary-looking skeleton like you? I pointed to the opened glass bottle on the floor. So because you set me free I should go together with you? I nodded again. Sorry, thanks for opening the bottle, but I don't want to follow you around. My shoulders dropped as I was disappointed by her response. Instead, I'll simply ride on top of you. Hee hee. She flitted her wings and landed atop my helmet. I'm Gwyn. I'll be riding you from now on, giddy up, giddy up. I seemed to have become a fairy's mount, but I didn't really mind. It wasn't so bad to have a somewhat noisy friend tagging along. Although I wasn't able to join in and start a conversation, just hearing Gwyn's voice brought joy to my heart. So one day I was playing in the woods, when suddenly a rogue wizard locked me up in that bottle. If it had just been a normal bottle I could have easily gotten out, but it must have been sealed through magic, so I was stuck. I would have preferred for Gwyn to speak more slowly or even sometimes stay quiet, but it was just my wishful thinking. I didn't have any way to communicate with her my desires, and even if she knew, I somehow doubted she would listen. While carrying Gwyn on my head, I searched all the nearby rooms carefully, but there wasn't any way out. "Hey you, do you have a name?" The fairy hovered in front of my face questioningly. It was such a small and pretty doll-like face. Despite her clothes green and tattered, her skin was soft and had a healthy pearl glow, giving her a mysterious look. However, when she starts talking I get the impression that she is quite mischievous. I shook my head. "Oh really? Then I'll give you one." Gwyn frowned, appearing deep in thought, so she didn't notice me trying to wave her off with my hand. It was already too late. Chompy. How about Chompy? As expected, such a ridiculous name from the impish fairy. Name, Chompy, has been selected. Status for your friend Pixie Gwyn is now available. What? A message appeared before me. Oh, a friend. Are you a pixie? I thought you were some kind of fairy. I first focused on the second message about Gwyn because it was my first friend in this world. Despite her giving me a funny-sounding name, I patted her head in acknowledgement. So are you happy I named you? He. I came up with it because it's the sound you make when you try to talk chomp. Chomp. It's perfect, right? From now on you're Chompy. Rushing back to her place atop my head, she yelled. Giddy up. I purposely chomped down with my teeth and began to run around halls making more chomping sounds. Listening to Gwyn's voice, I felt such excitement that I ran too much and overdid it. Despite running for so long I didn't feel any fatigue, but I noticed that my HP had dropped. It's enough, I'm getting dizzy. Luckily the little passenger was also getting tired, so we just sat down in the corner to rest. After a little while, we heard the sound of something approaching in the distance. Chompy, what are those sounds? Gwyn fluttered her wings and hovered before my face with a curious expression, but I shook my head. Well, don't you want to find out? Let's go see what's going on. I nodded. Come on Chompy, faster. Gwyn, go back on my helmet and I hurry along toward the sounds. Chompy, slow down, I can hear some people. I could hear the sound of footsteps and two people talking approaching from a distance, so I decided to hide behind a few stone statues. Is here okay? Asked Gwyn. I pointed my finger at her and then to my empty eye sockets. It was the only way to hide the light she was emitting. Is it okay? Wouldn't it hurt you? It would probably be fine since my eye sockets were empty. Oh right, without any eyes how was I able to see what's in front of me? The mystery of how my skeleton body worked was truly beyond me. Gwyn went into my eyes, a glow escaped, adding a certain life to them. I listened to the footsteps and covered my eyes with my shield. As they got closer I could make out the conversation more clearly. Jillian, is it true that there are heaps of treasure here? Yes, when I came about 4 months ago I wasn't able to explore too deeply because of the number of skeletons, but I'm sure there's a bunch of treasure. My subclass is historian and I can guarantee that what Jillian said was true. Sigh, pirate, I already regret coming to these old and smelly catacombs. You better be right about all the treasure, because if you've tricked me, I'll tell your wife that you cheated on her with Lillian last year. Oh no, please don't, Aislinn will kill me. So quickly show me where that treasure is. Do you have any idea how much it costs to hire a priest these days? It's not an amount that some small fries like you can afford to pay. Listening to their conversation I realized they were most likely the same group of people who attacked my group of skeletons with a fireball, causing me to fall down into the pit. Seems like this time they brought along a priest. Wait, has it already been 4 months? Between the training and monster hunting I had no clue how much time had passed down in the caves, but after hearing their conversation it must have been 4 months. Crack. 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 As their footsteps approached, 2 of the statues around me seemed to gain a life of their own. What? They weren't normal statues. The demon-shaped winged statues began to slowly move, shaking off the dust. It's a gargoyle. It was what first came to mind when I saw the stone statues move. A gargoyle is a stone statue in the shape of a winged demon that has been given life. It generally has decent resistance to both physical and magic damage. Only my enchanted weapon might have a chance of piercing its defenses. I looked at the dagger in my hand. It's an enchanted weapon with a gem in its hilt, emitting an aura of frost magic. They don't seem to think of me as enemy. I should stealthily escape to where those adventurers came from. When the people came in, I had heard the sound of a door opening, which for me represented a way out. Jillian, gargoyle. Shit. Hey, what do we do? Kriak. Thud. The door closes behind him automatically. Jillian turned to confirm the door was closed before coming to terms with the situation at hand. What are we going to fight them with? No choice. Fight. Our weapons won't even scratch them. Ian. How about your magic? Right now I can't, the casting time is quite long. Quickly, Jillian. Pirate. Buy me some time. Bang. You. Jillian let out a grunt as he received the brunt of two gargoyles' attacks, defending against the great sword. Pirate, perhaps a thief, attacked one with his dagger but was sent back flying from the impact. Pirate. They were a group of 4, a warrior and thief in the front line with a magician and priest in the back. When the thief was sent flying, the priest had to focus on healing him, so the warrior was soon overwhelmed and retreated, unable to defend from the gargoyle's heavy sword. With the front line having crumbled, the mage and priest were vulnerable. A gargoyle heads towards the spellcasters, counter-attacking never even crossed their minds as they did their best to barely dodge with awkward rolls. Lord, grace me with your strength. Bless. The priest quickly cast some emergency healing and buffs, but it wasn't very useful. The warrior was trying to use block to intercept the gargoyle going after his friend pirate, but it didn't seem to work as it continued to advance towards the wounded thief. Clang. The warrior slashed the gargoyle, but the sword bounced off and he is sent flying by the rebound. As he struggles to stand up, the advancing gargoyle tramples him with all its weight. Jillian. No. Croc. The sound of bones breaking could be heard as the warrior that was just stepped on spurts blood out from his mouth. That's going to be a party wipe, no one will survive. I had played many MMORPGs in the past and encountered similar situations. If the front line crumbles, the squishy backline should immediately retreat, otherwise it would result in them all being wiped out. Neither the priest or mage seemed willing to abandon their party, but to be truthful, with the door having closed behind him, there wasn't anywhere to escape to. The result had already been decided. Should we intervene? What if they can help us get out of here? Asked Gwyn, but I shook my head. Coming to a dungeon, they should have been prepared for such an outcome, and besides, it wasn't certain that they could help me get out. But above all, it's very likely for them to misunderstand the situation if they see a new monster coming out, and I didn't want to deal with such a nuisance. Ian. Melinda. Run away. The thief cries as he struggles to get up and place himself between the gargoyle and the squishy spellcast. That's a fatal blow, he couldn't have survived that. I watched quietly on the side, but felt Gwyn, who was hiding in my skull, get emotional. Chompy, please help him out, I'll find a way to make it up to you later. I am a being which is contracted with spirits, so if I don't help out in such situations I'll suffer a penalty. Penalty, I didn't know what that represented, but the possibilities were troublesome. I wasn't so inhuman as to deny my first friend's request, and I was also looking forward to how much experience a gargoyle would give. I took off my helmet and covered myself completely with a hooded robe, hiding all traces of me being a skeleton. The priest and mage were avoiding the gargoyle's sword, but it was just a matter of time. Carefully sneaking up behind the other gargoyle, I readied my dagger. It noticed me instantly and turned around, but there were no signs of hostility in its eyes. Well, it doesn't seem to consider me as an enemy, but I wonder how long that will last. Stab. Using 2 hands, I stabbed deeply into the back of its head. I worried that my dagger wouldn't do any damage because his head is made of stone, but the dagger was sharp enough. Fortune was with me as the gargoyle moved slightly and the dagger got wedged in a crack. It worked perfectly. Is it stuck now? But the bigger problem was that both gargoyles turned to me. I had aggroed both of them. Who are you? Thanks for your help. I heard the priest and mage say, but I was only focused on the gaze of these 2 stone demons. Damn it. Why didn't you get one-shotted? Slow. Slow. I began to retreat instantly and casted slow on each gargoyle. Having prioritized me as their enemy, they were both chasing me down, but thankfully they originally weren't very fast, and with the slow debuff I could easily outpace them. Chompy. So cool. When you cast spells you can speak. But, why are you running away now? I couldn't speak, so I had no way to answer Gwyn. Contemplating some strategies, I realized that the magic in the dagger would surely drain the first gargoyle's strength, and it was likely weakened. The bigger problem was the other one. How should I handle him? Thud. Thud. I rested for a while, allowing them to close the distance. I could hear their heavy footsteps heading my way. I think I should pull out the dagger and use it on the other one after he collapses. Thud. 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 The sound of footsteps was getting louder. This floor is very large, but it only went in one direction, so I had no way to lose them. I decided to lead them toward the pits where I fell down the first time. Relying on my knowledge of the landscape, I could lose them in the complicated cave system. I had been slowly leading the gargoyles towards the hole connecting the 2 floors. Thud. 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 Finally I arrived before the hole and waited for them to catch up. When they came into sight, I jumped in. Thud. 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 Huh. What? The footsteps were getting further away. They didn't follow me into the hole. I then remembered that gargoyles were originally stone statues meant to protect something, and it seems that a different floor is outside of their range. This might make hunting him quite easy, but first I'll need to confirm one thing. I came out of the hole and casted slow on the gargoyles, which were heading back towards the priest and mage. Slow. Slow. Fire shock. Fire shock. Within just 1.2 seconds I casted 4 spells and regained their aggro. They turned towards me and began their slow running motions, definitely under the effects of my slow. I ran back towards the hole and waited just outside its entrance. Come. If this works, you guys are dead meat. Thud. 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 I stayed near the hole, giving the gargoyles time to catch up. This time I waited until the very last second so as to confirm my hypothesis. Swoosh. Swoosh. Just as the gargoyles swung their heavy stone swords, I dodged, leaping into the hole. Thud. 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 As expected, they immediately lost interest in me when I left the floor's perimeter. Shortly after, I jumped back out and casted Fire Shock. Fire Shock. As soon as the 2 spells hit, they turned back towards me, truly such simple-minded creatures. Thud. 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 With my idea of escaping down the hole, I didn't need to waste mana using slow, so I could be more efficient. I jumped down the hole, and just as they turned around I came back out again. Fire Shock. Fire Shock. The gargoyles were mindlessly going around in circles, slaves to their aggro range. I repeated the process many times, trying to find the most efficient downtime between spells in order to allow my mana to replenish, but after 10 cycles I had finally run out. I went down the hole to hide in the pits, slowly recovering my MP. When it was restored, I had to run and catch the gargoyles, slowly kiting him back towards the passage, casting Fireshock when I had a chance. Finally, after the 100th Fireshock, the first gargoyle fell. Plus 277 experience points. Level increased 915. Acquired knowledge of tomb gargoyles. You can now learn new magic. Messages appeared before me as the gargoyle which I had stabbed with my enchanted dagger had finally fallen. Hey Chompy, did you finally manage to kill one? Gwyn, who had been sleeping in my skull the whole time, just woke up, evidently bored. I'm going through all this trouble for you, but you're just sleeping. I wanted to scream at her, but I could just clack my teeth. He Tilda, good job, keep it up. I'll just go back to sleep. Damn. Having just acquired some new spells after killing a new monster, I gained some certainty towards my previous hypothesis regarding the acquisition of new magic. So killing different monsters gives me access to new spells. Do I also need to level up or just kill a new monster? Regardless, this was a great harvest. While I was resting in the hole, rejoicing about all my gains, the second gargoyle had turned around. I won't let you escape. I went out to catch it while opening my status window. Name, Chompy. Gender, N.A. Status, normal. Type, skeleton, undead. Class, wizard. Rank, H+. Level, 15/20. HP, 29/29. MP, 31/70. Attack, 16. Defense, 4. Agility, 12. Intelligence, 34. Unique skills. Resurrection Lv1, Night Vision Lv1, Falling Resistance Lv1, Magic Chanting Max. Fireshock Max, Lesser Slow Max. Titles. Rat Trapper, Hit and Run. Magic Selection. Lesser Petrification Lv1, Intermediate Slow Lv1, Fireball Lv1. Perhaps because I had killed a gargoyle, I was able to learn the new petrification magic. It was an interesting choice, but I figured that I already had the slow spell as crowd control and needed to increase my DPS. It wouldn't always be the case that I could kite monster across the rooms or use a trick like I had done with the hole. You have learned Fireball Lv1. As I was running to catch the last gargoyle, I picked up my enchanted dagger embedded in its partner's corpse. When it came within view, I used my ability to check its status. Status, slowed, rare. Type, tomb gargoyle, granted life. Rank, G+. Level, 24/80. HP, 144/484. MP, 1/1. Attack, 100. Defense, 1000. Agility, 12. Intelligence, 10. Unique skills. Physical Resistance Lv3, Magic Resistance Lv1. Gargoyles were so strong compared to the slime I had hunted previously. Incredible HP and defense, making it a great tank, but its attack damage was still enough to one-shot me. No wonder it took so long to hunt the first one. My Fireshock only does about 2 to 3 damage. I stabbed it in the back with my dagger and ran away chanting my spells. Slow. Fireshock. I brought him back towards the hole and used the same aggro cheat until it eventually collapsed. Plus 277 experience points. Level increased 15/18. The rate of increase had slowed down. Seems like it required noticeably more experience as the levels got higher. I was slightly disappointed because I was expecting to evolve. Wow, did you take care of the last one? Good job, Chompy. This guy, such a terrible friend to carry around. Chomp. Chomp. I was complaining, but only the sound of my teeth could be heard. Gwyn flew out from my eye socket and hovered before my face with a playful expression. What did you say? I couldn't hear you. Repeat it once more. I have to endure. Just ignore that little rascal. I leveled up and gained a new skill. Let's just focus on that. I turned around and headed back towards the main hall. Hey there. Thanks for your help. The priest and mage watched me approach from far away. Fortunately, they were not yet aware that I was a skeleton because the only light down here was emitted by the moss on the walls. It was very hard for them to see well, so I only appeared as a human surrounded by shadows. Gwyn quickly hid in my skull and shouted at the approaching adventurers. Don't come near me. I'm unable to be close to people. It was funny to hear Gwyn try to pass her voice off as mine. Having her voice echo through my skull was also a weird feeling. It was a situation that could only be found in some strange movie. I'm sorry, I didn't know. They shivered and stopped advancing. Please save our friends. I'm sorry I wasn't able to help you earlier, but you should return to where you came from. This place is not safe. Gwyn's tiny voice escaped from my skull, but the adventurers didn't seem to have any intentions of going back. We don't know how to get back. The door we came through has been locked and we can't get through. That must have been the scraping sound I heard while the fight just started, but it was good to get a confirmation. I don't know of any way out, so take care of yourselves. Gwyn struggled to squeeze out those last words and I quickly headed off to the small hole. The longer we stayed talking, the more suspicious they would get, which might lead to a troublesome situation. It was after all quite difficult for such a small being to imitate a human speech. Although she couldn't keep it up for long, I was glad to have Gwyn talk in my stead, because otherwise, I could only run away immediately, which would be even more awkward. Shortly after, a few messages appeared in front of me. Acquired title, Savior Lv1. Acquired title, Cold-Hearted Lv1. Huh. Was that supposed to be a compliment? Is it agreeing with my actions? The implication of the titles was somewhat disturbing, but I chose to focus on the problem at hand. I was now back in the tomb, rummaging through the tyrant's pile of spoils. I searched for many clothes so that the next time I meet people I can better hide my identity as a skeleton. The tyrant loved shiny things the most, so all the clothes he had collected had some jewels in them. I wore an ancient but good quality robe, gloves and shoes, all enchanted with durability spells to stand the test of time. With all that bling, I looked more like a hip-hop warrior than ever before. I wasn't interested in covering my face with some rags, so I used a full helmet to cover my skull. Chompy, you look so fat. How am I even supposed to get in? Having so much clothes and armor was too constraining and made my movements quite stiff. Gwyn was also complaining that she had no way to access the inside of my skull if I wore the helmet, but it wasn't a big problem. If Gwyn really needs to go in, I can simply take it off. I kept listening to her grumbling, insisting she be let inside. The problem was whether I'd be able to hunt those tomb rats with such stiff movements. After separating from the two humans, I decided to further explore the catacombs. Maybe I would get lucky and find an exit somewhere. If I hadn't found the Tomb Tyrant's treasure cave, I wouldn't have found the path to this floor, so the possibility existed that there were other hidden paths. Aha! Eventually I discovered another new path, half hidden behind a large rock. Surprisingly, it was located nearby the pit I had originally fallen down through. I had been trying to fin. Chompy. I can smell some water in this cave. I would have never known because, having no nose, I had no sense of smell, but luckily Gwyn was with me. I was feeling hopeful because if you are trapped underground, following running water is usually a good way out. Boom. Boom. It was the sound of an incredibly large beast reverberating along the cave floor. Chompy. What's that sound? I'm scared. Gwyn struggled to push up my helmet before sneaking in and hiding inside my skull. But really, what's the difference? It's not like being in there guarantees her safety. Looking around, I realized that the walls of the narrow path were glossy and smooth, almost as if the rock had been melted. How hot must the fire be to melt walls? Thud. 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 The trembling was getting louder as the beast was approaching. Damn. I need to get out of here. Running at top speed, I went back the same way I came. Hey, where are you going? Are you going to help them find a way out? Gwyn had come out, flying beside me, trying to figure out my intentions. Gwyn looked at me beaming, proud of my selflessness, but I shook my head. Oh, then what are you doing? I grabbed Gwyn and stuffed her back into my skull. Excuse me, but do you have something to eat? The priest asked as I got closer. It seems like he had been following me the whole time. Fortunately, I had thrown Gwyn inside just in time and tapped my skull to remind her of her duty. I had heard his footsteps getting close, so I reacted quickly. Gwyn was upset that I threw her in without any warning, but when she heard his voice she calmed down and understood. Nope, I have no food. Gwyn was definitely useful in these kinds of situations. We really have no food at all. Could you give us just a little bit? I crossed my fingers in the shape of an X, helping Gwyn and the humans understand that I didn't have any food. Sorry, but there really isn't any. I said before that you shouldn't have come to this place. Sorry, I have to ask because Ian is dying of thirst. Do you have any water? I again showed the X sign with my fingers. Sorry, I don't have any water either. How is that? How good can you survive without water? He was visibly angry, most likely having misunderstood that I had food and water but was unwilling to share. I don't know. Gwyn's simple reply left him perplexed as I kept waking away, anxious to distance myself from the newly explored cave. Kawung. Kuwong. Kawung. Looking across the hall, I could see an immense four-legged monster which seemed to be the boss of the area. Is that a dragon? With such long legs, it must be nearly 10 meters tall if it were to stand up. If I face him head-on, I'll definitely die. Push. What? The priest had approached from behind me and pushed me down. I had been too focused on the dragon and hadn't been aware of my surroundings. It was my mistake. Ha. You wanted to eat alone and live well. Also, when we were in danger with the gargoyles, you didn't exactly rush in to help. You can consider this as our revenge. Ha ha ha. We will soon die of thirst, but you will join us, he cried as he ran away. I rolled over and saw his back running away. I had risked my life to save them from the gargoyles, and yet this is how I was repaid. I realized I was on death's door. My body was frozen in fear, simply watching the dragon approach as I stayed sitting down. It had a gigantic grayish-brown body. Its countless scales were hard like turtle shells in hexagonal shape. Its height from its toes to the top of its head was approximately 3 meters, TL 7+ meter legs, and it had the long nostril face of a crocodile, but with bigger and more menacing teeth protruding. It also had a short neck, much like an alligator. Thud. 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 It quickly closed the 6-meter gap we had and uses its large nostrils to smell me. Sniff. Sniff. Smelly. Gwyn, who was hiding in my skull, was suffering greatly from the stench, but luckily I couldn't smell anything. Is this how I'm going to die? I was completely immobile, so it wasn't clear if it knew I was alive simply by smelling me. I hope it thinks I'm dead. Oh dear. Crunch. Crunch. It chomped down at my thighs, separating my upper body, and immediately swallowed me without chewing. I am so nauseous. Single quote. I went straight to its stomach, tossing and turning until I couldn't differentiate up from down and uncertain how long I had been inside. Luckily, when I finally recovered my bearings, I checked my status window and my stats hadn't dropped. I was in its stomach, but I hadn't been digested yet. TSSSHH. TSSSHH. When what remained of my robe touched the gastric acids, a sizzling sound was heard. His stomach was quite large and there were more pieces of meat inside than I expected. Despite having lost both my legs, I was able to walk around on my thigh stumps, albeit very awkwardly. Damn humans, I'll never forget my mistake today. A skeleton isn't supposed to help people. Chompy, I'm sorry, I didn't expect him to be such a bad human. When I had overheard them talking when they first walked into the dungeon, I knew the priest couldn't be a good person, but I never imagined that he would repay my kindness with evil. I will definitely have to get my revenge if I ever get out of here. Can I use magic inside its stomach? I was curious to see how vulnerable its insides were. Its scales were definitely incredibly hard, but would it be the same case for its squishy interior? Fireball. Fireball Lv1 The area where the fireball impacted was charred black. It was probably cooked medium well. Raw. The dragon cried in pain. It definitely was more sensitive on its insides. It rolled over in pain, which meant I was sent flying every which way inside the stomach. This is my last resort. Taking full advantage of my quick magic chanting, I let loose continuous fireballs until my MP dropped to 0. Fireball. Fireball. Fireball Lv2 Fireball. 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 Fireball Lv3 Go Chompy. Show him who's boss. Just as my MP was running low, I finally broke through and was poured outside along with all the other stuff in its stomach. I had also wrapped Gwyn up in my robe because I had noticed it was somewhat resistant to the acid. TSSSSHH. It was the sound of my robe resisting the stomach acids as I felt fresh air for the first time in a while. I quickly pulled off my robe and rolled outside, avoiding as much acidic fluids as possible. You have learned acid resistance Lv1. Luke. The dragon vomited terribly before collapsing to the ground, clearly devoid of any strength. Although it was still alive, it was in critical condition because it had a burnt hole in its stomach. After carefully confirming that the half-dead dragon was on its last legs, I took the time to look around. We appeared to be in its nest, judging by the hundreds of large broken bones as well as 3 large eggs. Although 2 of these roughly 50 centimeter wide eggs were already broken, one did appear intact. I made my way towards the last egg. If the dragon somehow recovered its strength, I planned on using it as a hostage to escape safely. Wiggle. Wiggle. Out of nowhere 3 1-meter thick larvae-like creatures dug their way out from the ground. It's a worm. Gwyn was great at pointing out the obvious. Roar. The fallen dragon tried to scare him off with a show of force, but it couldn't keep up the facade for long. Although the worms were intimidated at first, when they realized how weak it currently was, they didn't hesitate to approach and began feasting on its body. The dragon tried some last-ditch efforts but soon lay down in defeat, allowing the worms and their incredibly sharp teeth to gorge themselves until they swelled to double their original size. Disgusting, they're known as the underground cleaners. As far as I know, they don't attack living creatures, but I've never seen such big worms. Quote. Gwyn was informing me from within my skull. Hey Gwyn, don't you realize that we almost melted inside that guy's stomach? I was grumbling in my mind, but Gwyn seemed to have completely forgotten about our previous life and death situation, and had quickly returned to her chatty ways. The worms are going to eat his soft parts, look. Look. Does a dragon's tough meat even taste good? I never expected that these worms could eat so much. It didn't even occur to me to run away, and I just stood there motionless, watching the scene of a dragon's body being systematically dismantled and gobbled up until only a small pile of bones and flesh remained. Plus 10224 experience points. Level increased 1820. Level has reached max. Evolution is now possible. You have learned Status Check Lv1. You have learned Sage's Wisdom Lv1. Acquired title, Dragon Slayer Lv1. A slew of messages appeared before my eyes. Oh, did it count as my kill? Sweet. After finishing their feast, the worms immediately disappeared underground, not bothering with me in the least. I faced Gwyn and pointed to my missing legs. You want to find where your legs are? All right. I'll fly ahead and look for you. I crawled on the floor using my arms. I definitely have to find and reattach my legs before going through with my evolution. I didn't know if I would still have my ability to reconnect my limbs after evolving, so it's better to be safe than sorry. Found them. Come here. This way. Gwyn guided me for the next 30 minutes as I struggled to crawl along the floor, back towards my legs and the passage leading back to the catacombs. I gnashed my teeth. I will get my revenge. Comments, 1. Iloquist January 7, 2021.